1924, a teacher in Germany was arrested after parents noticed their children returning from school with strange bruises and an inexplicable terror of their classroom. When police searched his home, they found over 40 meticulously detailed journals spanning 3 decades, documenting thousands of acts of torture, abuse, and murder committed against children. But what made investigators physically sick wasn't just the content, it was the tone. He wrote like a food critic reviewing restaurants, rating his victims on scales of 1 to 10, noting which methods produced the most satisfying screams, describing children's final moments with the detached precision of a scientist observing lab rats. His name was Friedrich Haarmann, and by the time authorities finished investigating, they realized they weren't just dealing with a monster. They were dealing with something history had never seen before and desperately wanted to forget. Before we dive into this disturbing case, leave us a comment with what time it is where you are and whether you can sleep after these stories. And if you're brave enough not to miss any of our weekly cases, subscribe to the channel now. Turn off the lights, turn up the volume, and let's unravel this mystery that history tried to erase. Hanover, Germany, 1918. Friedrich Haarmann was 39 years old when he returned from World War I, where he had served as a medic. To his neighbors, he seemed like an ordinary veteran trying to rebuild his life in a war-torn country. He was short, barely 5'5", with a forgettable face and a quiet demeanor that made him blend into crowds. He worked as a police informant, helping authorities track black market activities in the chaos of post-war Germany. He ran a small butcher shop that sold meat at prices so low that desperate, hungry families considered him a godsend during the famine years. He was helpful, polite, seemed genuinely concerned about the welfare of young men who had been displaced by the war. No one suspected that Friedrich Haarmann was actively hunting, killing, and butchering human beings, then selling their flesh to unsuspecting customers as pork and beef. Haarmann's hunting ground was Hanover's main train station, a hub for refugees, runaways, and displaced young men in the aftermath of World War I. Germany was in chaos. Millions were homeless, families had been torn apart, and teenage boys wandered the streets looking for work, food, shelter. Haarmann positioned himself as a benefactor, offering these desperate young men a hot meal, a place to stay, sometimes even employment. His connection to the police gave him an air of authority and legitimacy. When he approached a frightened teenager at the station and offered help, they had no reason to suspect danger. They saw a small, middle-aged man with kind eyes who worked with law enforcement. They didn't see the predator evaluating them like livestock. Haarmann's method was refined through repetition. He would bring victims to his apartment, feed them, gain their trust, then kill them through what he described in his later confession as a love bite, biting through their throat until they died from blood loss. But the killing was just the beginning of the horror. Haarmann had learned butchering skills during his time as a meat seller, and he applied those skills to human bodies with industrial efficiency. He would dismember victims in his bathtub, separate usable meat from waste, process the flesh exactly as he would animal carcasses. Then he would take the meat to his shop and sell it to customers who praised the quality and flavor, never knowing they were committing cannibalism. The bones and unusable body parts posed a disposal problem that Haarmann solved with chilling pragmatism. He would wrap them in newspaper and dispose of them in the Leine River that ran through Hanover, timing his disposals for when the river was high and fast-moving. He sold some victims clothing at the local market, altered their identification papers to use for black market activities, kept personal items as trophies. Nothing was wasted. Every part of his victims was either consumed, sold, or discarded with careful planning. It was murder as a business model, systematic and profit-driven. For 6 years, from 1918 to 1924, Haarmann operated with impunity. The chaos of post-war Germany provided perfect cover. Missing young men were common, authorities were overwhelmed. Families searching for lost sons were told their children had probably moved to another city looking for work. Harman's position as a police informant gave him inside knowledge of investigations and the ability to deflect suspicion. When neighbors complained about strange noises or smells from his apartment, police who knew him would dismiss the concerns, assuming it was related to his butcher shop. He was protected by his usefulness to the authorities, his reputation as a helpful citizen, and the systematic failure of institutions to prioritize the lives of marginalized young men. The case began to crack in May 1924, when children playing near the Line River found human skulls washed up on the banks. At first, authorities believed they were looking at a burial site that had been disturbed by flooding. But as more bones were discovered, the forensic evidence told a different story. These weren't ancient remains. They were relatively fresh, and they showed signs of precise dismemberment by someone with knowledge of anatomy. The bones belonged to at least a dozen different individuals, all young males aged roughly 12 to 20. The search of the river expanded, and over the next weeks, more than 500 bone fragments were recovered, representing an estimated 27 victims, though the true number was likely higher. Police began investigating anyone connected to the meat trade or butchering in Hanover. Harman's name came up repeatedly, not as a suspect initially, but as a police informant who might have useful information about criminal activities in the train station area. But when detectives interviewed him, something felt off. Harman was too helpful, too eager to provide information, too quick to suggest alternative theories. A young detective named Robert Siegert decided to watch Harman's apartment. Within days, he observed Harman bringing a teenage boy home, behaving in ways that suggested the relationship wasn't innocent. Siegert obtained a warrant to search the apartment for evidence of sexual misconduct with a minor, not expecting to find evidence of murder. The apartment at 27 Cellerstrasse looked ordinary at first glance, cramped but clean, with the normal furnishings of a working-class bachelor. But as detectives searched more carefully, the horror emerged. Bloodstains on the walls that had been painted over multiple times, a bathtub with scratches and stains that suggested regular, heavy use for something other than bathing. Most damning personal effects belonging to missing young men, watches, wallets, identification papers, all hidden in a trunk under the bed. When confronted with this evidence, Harman's calm facade cracked. He didn't deny the crimes. Instead, he seemed almost relieved to finally talk about them. Harman's confession took days to record because of its length and detail. He admitted to killing at least 27 young men, though he suggested the actual number might be over 40. He had lost count after the first few years. He described his method with clinical precision, how he selected victims based on their build and health, how he gained their trust, the exact technique he used to kill them, how he processed their bodies. Detectives listening to the confession reported feeling physically ill, not just from the content, but from Harman's tone. He showed no remorse, no recognition that he had done something wrong. He spoke about his victims the way a farmer might discuss livestock, evaluating their quality, noting which ones had provided the most meat, complaining about logistical challenges. But it was Harman's journals, discovered hidden in a false wall in his apartment, that revealed the true depth of his depravity. Over 40 notebooks filled with neat handwriting, documenting 3 decades of crimes, starting well before his return from the war. He had been killing since he was a teenager, had refined his methods over 30 years, had developed a philosophical framework to justify his actions. The journals contained victim names when he knew them, physical descriptions, dates of death, methods used, ratings of the experience on various scales. He had favorite victims that he returned to in his writing again and again, describing them with an affection that was more disturbing than hatred would have been. He wrote about eating human flesh, not as a necessity, but as a preference, describing the taste and texture, comparing different ages and body types, feeling that chill down your spine. If you're enjoying these mysteries, leave a like on the video to help us continue investigating cases like these. And in the comments, tell us if you've heard of these cases before or know any different theories. Subscribe so you don't miss the next mysteries. Now get ready, because what comes next will keep you up at night. The journals also revealed something that investigators found almost as disturbing as the murders themselves: Harman's awareness of his own psychology. He wrote long passages analyzing his own motivations, describing the evolution of his desires, noting patterns in his behavior. It was clear he understood that what he was doing was considered wrong by society. He simply didn't care. He saw himself as superior, freed from the constraints of morality that limited lesser beings. He viewed his victims not as people, but as resources, and he saw nothing wrong with using resources efficiently. The journals suggested a level of self-awareness and intelligence that made his crimes even more chilling. This wasn't a man driven by uncontrollable urges or mental illness. This was someone who had consciously chosen to become a predator and had spent decades perfecting his craft. The trial of Friedrich Harman in December 1924 became a media sensation that gripped not just Germany, but the entire world. It was one of the first true crime cases to receive extensive newspaper coverage, and the details that emerged shocked a society that thought it had seen the worst of human nature during the war. The prosecution presented evidence of 27 murders, though everyone involved believed the true number was much higher. Witnesses testified about seeing Harman with victims shortly before they disappeared, about buying meat from his shop that tasted strange, about hearing disturbing sounds from his apartment. The bones recovered from the river were displayed in court, and forensic experts testified about the precision of the dismemberment. The clear signs that the person who did this had professional butchering skills. Harman's behavior during the trial was studied intensely by psychiatrists and criminologists. He showed no emotion when viewing evidence of his crimes, no reaction to testimony from victims' families. He corrected prosecutors when they got details wrong about specific murders, as if his reputation as an efficient killer was more important than his freedom or life. When asked if he felt remorse, he seemed genuinely confused by the question, explaining that he had done what was necessary for his survival and satisfaction, that his victims had served a purpose. Multiple psychiatrists evaluated him, and their conclusions were unanimous. Harman was not insane in any legal sense. He understood right from wrong, knew his actions were illegal, and had taken elaborate precautions to avoid detection. He was fully competent and completely immoral, a combination that terrified everyone who encountered him. The verdict was never in doubt. Harman was found guilty of 24 murders. The 3 cases where evidence was circumstantial were excluded to ensure the conviction would be ironclad. He was sentenced to death by beheading, the standard method of execution in Germany at the time. Harman accepted the sentence with the same indifference he had shown throughout the trial. His only request was that his body be cremated and the ashes scattered so that nothing of him would remain, a final act of control, even in death. On April 15, 1925, Friedrich Harman was executed. According to witnesses, he showed no fear, made no final statement, simply laid his head on the block with the calm of someone completing a routine task. But Harman's execution didn't end the horror. It just marked the beginning of Germany's desperate attempt to erase him from history. His apartment building was demolished despite protests from the owner. Every item from his home was burned, the furniture, the clothes, the tools he had used for dismemberment, everything destroyed to eliminate any possibility of morbid souvenirs. His journals were sealed in government archives with strict instructions that they never be published or made public. Newspapers were pressured to stop covering the case, to let it fade from public memory. The victims' families were encouraged to move away, to change their names, to forget. Official records were altered to minimize the case. Death certificates for victims listed accidental deaths or disappearances rather than murder, anything to avoid association with Harman. The German government's motivation for erasure was complex. Partly it was shame. The case had exposed massive failures in law enforcement and social services, revealed how easily a predator could operate when authorities dismissed the disappearances of marginalized people. But it was also fear of what Harman represented, the possibility that evil could be this systematic, this intelligent, this successful for so long. If one man could kill 40 or more people over decades without being caught, how many others might be doing the same? The case challenged fundamental assumptions about safety, about the ability of society to protect its vulnerable members, about the nature of evil itself. It was easier to erase Harman from history than to confront those uncomfortable questions. For decades, the case of Friedrich Harman existed only in whispered rumors and sealed archives. When scholars tried to research it, they found documents had been destroyed or were classified indefinitely. Survivors who had known victims were reluctant to speak, traumatized by their experiences and by the social stigma of association with the case. It wasn't until the 1990s, nearly 70 years after Harman's execution, that researchers were finally able to access some of the sealed archives and begin piecing together the full scope of his crimes. What they discovered was worse than the rumors had suggested. The body count was likely higher, the duration of his crimes longer, the failures of institutions more extensive. Modern forensic psychologists who have studied Harman's case consider him one of the most disturbing serial killers in history. Not because of the number of victims, but because of the level of organization, premeditation, and cold rationality he displayed. Most serial killers show signs of psychological disintegration over time, becoming more reckless, more violent, less controlled. Harman showed the opposite pattern, becoming more efficient, more careful, more successful over 3 decades. He treated murder as a skill to be refined, a business to be optimized, displaying a level of systematic evil that challenges our understanding of criminal psychology. He forces us to confront the possibility that some people aren't broken or sick, they're simply wired differently, lacking the fundamental empathy that makes us human, and there's no way to fix that. The case also exposed uncomfortable truths about how society values different lives. Harman's victims were almost exclusively young men from marginalized backgrounds, runaways, orphans, refugees, people whose disappearances weren't vigorously investigated. He knew this, targeted them specifically because they were vulnerable and less likely to be missed. The same pattern appears in serial killer cases throughout history. Predators instinctively understand which victims society cares about and which it doesn't, and they exploit that calculus. Harman operated for 6 years in plain sight because the lives of displaced young men weren't considered worth the resources required for serious investigation, a moral failure that enabled dozens of murders. Perhaps most disturbing is the question of how many people unknowingly participated in Harman's crimes. Hundreds of families in Hanover bought and consumed meat from his shop during those 6 years. Statistically, most of them must have purchased human flesh at some point, fed it to their children, praised the quality and flavor. They were unwitting cannibals, and when the truth emerged, many of them were traumatized by the realization. Some moved away immediately, unable to live in the same city. Others denied it was possible, insisted the meat they bought must have been the rare animal product, unable to psychologically accept what they had done. The case created a collective trauma that Hanover tried desperately to forget. Another reason why erasing Haarmann from history seemed like the only solution. Today, Friedrich Haarmann is largely unknown outside of Germany, and even within Germany, he's rarely discussed. There are no museums about his crimes, no memorials to his victims, no popular books or movies. When he is mentioned in academic contexts, it's usually briefly, as a footnote to more well-known cases. The erasure was largely successful. Most people have never heard his name, and those who have often know only fragments of the story. But the case continues to haunt the few who study it deeply, because it reveals truths about human nature and societal structures that we'd prefer not to confront. That evil can be rational and systematic, that institutions often fail those who need protection most, that ordinary people can unknowingly participate in atrocities, and that sometimes the only response is to try to forget, to erase, to pretend it never happened. The legacy of Friedrich Haarmann isn't just in the lives he took or the families he destroyed. It's in the questions he forces us to ask. How many other predators are operating successfully right now, protected by society's blind spots? How many vulnerable people are disappearing without serious investigation? What other uncomfortable truths are being actively erased from history because confronting them is too painful? And perhaps most terrifying, if we successfully erase Haarmann from collective memory, do we lose the lessons his case could teach about recognizing and preventing similar monsters in the future? These cases continue to haunt us. If you're as disturbed as we are, leave a like, and comment your theories, and share with anyone brave enough to listen. Explore our channel to learn about more unsolved mysteries and the darkest secrets in history. If you haven't subscribed yet, join the brave souls who follow our cases. Hit the subscribe button, turn on notifications so you don't miss any new cases, leave your like if this video left you thinking, and share it with that friend who says they're not afraid of anything. Comments are open. Tell us what other disturbing cases you want us to investigate. Until next time, and sleep well if you can.